All right, so firstly, I just want to thank everyone for coming to this last resolution webinar. I think we've had about 4 or 5 of them now, and we hope that they've been really helpful. This is the last one before GA, so yeah, we're just really excited to have everyone here. So today we're going to be focusing on resolution debate and how to just generally be prepared for General Assembly. I am honored to be joined by 2 co-presenters today. I'll go ahead and introduce myself first and then let them introduce themselves. My name is Catherine Squire. I'm the Vice President of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges, and I'm also a current student at San Joaquin Delta College.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gerardo Chavez. I'm the Regional Affairs Director for Region 9, and I'm also a student at Riverside City College. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jen Galanado. I am the Regional Affairs Director for Region 2, as well as a student at Sacramento City Community College, and it is so nice to see you all here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So just to kind of recap where we are in our resolution process, there's about 5 steps in our process. Obviously, our students have written resolutions, have found sponsors, submitted resolutions, made amendments, and now we're getting ready to present at General Assembly. So we're really at that point now. We're a week away. So we just want to make sure that everyone is prepared to participate in debate, knows how to debate respectfully and appropriately, and also knows the convention rules for debate and all the little details that go into that. So the most important date on our calendar was about a month ago, but just to recap, our amended resolution packet did get disseminated on February 22nd, 2021. So this is actually the final packet that goes out before General Assembly. So this is really the one that you want to get all your feedback on from students, from your student body associations, and all your critical campus partners. And yeah, that was 30 calendar days prior to GA. And also just to recap, what is General Assembly? Some of you, it may be your first time, you don't really know what might be happening. So General Assembly is happening March 26th through the 28th. It's really a gathering of all delegates from all of our 116 community colleges in California. It's a really awesome event. What happens there, we have resolution voting, obviously, so there will be some time for debate, and then we're going to go into the votes. So you guys, everyone will get to see which ones get passed and which ones don't. We also have executive elections happening. So just want to give an overview, just because GA is a lot more than just resolution voting. So with executive elections, we have a number of candidates who are running to take positions on the SSCCC's statewide executive board for the next year. So all the positions that we currently have, President, VP, or VPLA, VPRA, VPC, and VPF. So all the VPs kind of have like a specific area that they focus in. So our VPF focuses on finances, the Vice President of Finances. Our VPLA focuses on legislative affairs and putting together bill proposals. So those elections are really important to be participating in. So the delegates actually get to vote for who those positions go to. We do have a candidate forum where delegates are able to ask questions to those candidates and really get to hear from them and get to know them. So that is a really exciting portion of GA. I myself got to participate in that last year, so it's just a really fun time to attend. And lastly, we also have a series of workshops going on just on different topics that pertain to student leaders. So we have a number of diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops. If you want to be involved with legislative advocacy, this is also where we bring in a lot of our system partners. So we have partner organizations like FACCC, so those are a faculty member organization. and the number of others that really work with us on those workshops. So those are super exciting to attend. They're really fun, and you just get to know people around the state of California. So yeah, Gerardo or Jen, have anything to add? All right, and then I just want to share some resources. We do have the link up on the screen to where you can find the amended packet of resolutions. It is available on our website. So obviously we hope that everyone has been sharing that, but we just encourage you to have a refresher and take a look at that before GA again, so you can find it there. We have been getting a lot of questions about amendments. That is something that the SSCCC used to do in the past, but just one important distinction about something that happened at last year's GA as well as this year's GA, we're actually not going to be accepting amendments on the floor. So that's just something to keep in mind. We used to do it and it used to be really messy, and there was a really ineffective way to handle those. So we've just decided not to accept those anymore. And so the way that you vote on resolutions now is just a yes or no vote. There's no really opportunity to amend a resolution that's presented. All right, so now we're really gonna get into what is the debate process and all the questions that you may have about that. Some important rules about the participation for a resolution debate. Anyone can participate, so you don't have to be a delegate. You can be a member of the public as well. You can be a director, so that's something important to keep in mind. But in order to vote, you must be a registered delegate. So only the delegates are the ones who really have the power to vote. And so you must have registered by March 25th, 2021 at 5 p.m. All attendees will be muted upon entering, and so only those who are recognized will be asked to unmute. So just keep that in mind. And then we'll ask you to mute yourself after you're done. And then the chat room is going to be changed to public. So you don't really want to use the chat room unless you want to be recognized by the chair, just because everyone is going to see all the messages that get sent out. And just a last note, you really want to make sure to register in advance with Poll Everywhere to vote. If you don't register, you are not going to be able to vote. That's the only way that we allow votes. We had problems with this last year and a lot of trouble with delegates getting set up with that. So we just really encourage you to get that process started early if you can. And so that way, if you run into issues, you can contact our executive director and our executive team so we can help you with that. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about our debate process. In normal non-COVID times, our debate process would look a lot different than what it's going to look like online. Generally, when we have our debate process and we have GA in person, what happens is there are three microphones that are set up. And so delegates really line up behind the microphone that they want to speak at. And each of these microphones have a purpose. So there is a pro microphone. And so when we open up the floor to debate a resolution, all the students who want to argue in favor of approving the resolution will line up behind that microphone. And so a pro is someone that speaks for the resolution. And then we also have a con microphone. So all the students who want to speak against approving the resolution would line up behind that one. And then there's a third microphone for Parli Pro. Parli Pro is reserved for delegates only and is used to exercise parliamentary procedures only. So for example, if you have, a point of order, someone is speaking out of order, or I don't know, Gerardo, Jen, you want to give me another example? No. I know we have a section on motions, so I guess we'll wait till we get to that. But yeah, Parli Pro is just for parliamentary procedures. So that would be one example. Just keep in mind, online, we will be keeping track of which college has spoken already. And so the debate alternates between pro and con. So it's not like we'll take 5 pros in a row and then 5 cons. It will go back and forth. And then also one thing to note is no single college speaks twice in a row. So you really want to be intentional with what you say during your turn, because you may not get the chance to speak again, given that there are 116 delegates, right? So that's just really important to know. So that would be what our process looks like in normal non-COVID times, right? But obviously we're gonna be on Zoom. So this process is actually gonna translate to being used in the chat. And we'll go ahead and move on for that. So obviously everyone, public or delegate, regardless of whether they are pro or con, is gonna be in the same speaking queue. And we're actually gonna use the chat for that. We're gonna alternate between pro and con. And the way that we're gonna use the chat room is to have delegates enter the following information. So you're gonna enter whether you're a pro and con, comma, your name. So you would say like the delegate, if that's your title, and then comma, your college, the college you're from. Or conversely, if you were a con slash, cons, comma, name, comma, college. If you're a member of the public, and that would include directors and anyone else that's maybe just a student or a member of the public, you only need to enter, what your position is, some kind of identifier. So conversely, pro, comma, an identifier, or con, comma, an identifier. And then note, the public does not have to give any identifying information. If they choose not to provide an identifier, they don't have to. We'll just kind of assign a number to them that depends on, the order that they came in the chat. So yeah, basically the way that we are going to decide the order is just that, the chat can kind of order who is coming out, what messages are coming out. So we'll kind of go through that way. And I think I'll actually ask kind of Gerardo and Jen to maybe demonstrate. So let's say, Gerardo and Jen, let's say Gerardo, you were speaking for pro and you were a delegate from your college. How would you enter that in the chat? So I'll give him a minute. All right, there we go. So as he said in the chat, he named pro, so that's the position, comma, his name, and then comma, what college he's from. If you're a delegate, you want to include your title. I'm gonna go ahead and have Jen participate as well, and we'll do a little role playing here. Say if you were a member of the public, how would you address yourself in the chat? All right, so if Jen didn't want to identify herself, she would put con, comma, an identifier, right? And then we would kind of know that she's a member of the public. Yeah, it might be just best practice to put, instead of if you don't want to put your name or anything, you can put comma, member of the public. That might just be the best way to get addressed. So as you can see in the chat, it kind of tells you the order of what messages came in first. So obviously that would be the first person to be recognized, and then we go down that list. So that's kind of a demonstration of what this is going to look like in a virtual environment using Zoom. All right, continuing on with our convention rules, the chair's assistants will be keeping track of who is next. You'll have that information when it goes out with the agenda, so all those names will be specified. And so the chair's assistant will be informing the chair by voice who the next speaker is, so they'll say that person's message out loud. We also have a timekeeper, so each speaker will only be given 2 minutes. So say you wanted to speak out in favor of the resolution, so you were a pro, you would have 2 minutes to do that before we would move on to the next person. So that's also something to keep in mind. Each resolution debate will be a total of 10 minutes, so there is a kind of a cap on debate, but time can be expended for a specific resolution with a motion to extend time. by a registered delegate. And then just one important thing to keep in mind is that debate can only be extended once per resolution for a maximum of 5 minutes. Okay, and I see we have a hand raised. So I'll go ahead and take that question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask quickly, so if there were an uneven number of pros and cons, do we only entertain a matching proportion of pros and cons, or do we, yeah, that's my basic question.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So yeah, that's basically what would happen. We would alternate between pros and cons. So say there were 5, I guess, yeah. No, yeah, 5, and there were like, I guess we would go back and forth. So pro 1, con 1, pro 2, con 2. If after the next pro, there's not a con, then that means at that time that we would stop debate. So it goes until it can't be, like we can't alternate anymore, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question? I just want to make sure that makes sense.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and then just one thing I want to clarify. If there is a motion to extend time, there's a limit. You can only extend time up to 5 minutes. I don't know if I mentioned that already, but I just wanted to clarify. So I know this is a lot of information so far, so I'm gonna kind of stop and pause for a minute and see if there are any other questions. Okay. I don't hear any other questions, so we'll go ahead and keep moving. Oh, that was my last slide. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pass it off to Gerardo to talk us through some common parliamentary motions and other parliamentary details that might come up.
All right, so we're going to talk about parliamentary motions. So please take advantage of this time to get the information, ask any questions, because parliamentary procedure, when you walk into a room with a lot of people with more than 100 delegates, parliamentary procedure is your way to make sure that your voice is heard, but to also make sure that the meeting is running efficiently. So any registered delegate may make the motion to approve a resolution by stating the following. You would put delegate, then your college name. So Delegate Cerritos College, move to approve the name of resolution. Please make sure that you spell it out completely. Don't put, Delegate Cerritos College motion, or I move to approve. Please be sure to include every little detail so that way they're able to recognize your motion. It's happened to me before at the previous General Assembly. I was a delegate and I had the habit to be the first one to make a motion. I would just have my name, the college of my name, and then I moved to approve. And then somebody called me out and said, like, what are you making a motion to approve on? So please make sure that you include what do you want to approve? And then obviously the motion must be then seconded by another college who can simply state seconded. You do not need to be recognized to make a second. You can just put in the chat seconded. And you don't have to include your name. Yeah, it just needs to be second.
Yeah, and the chair will always repeat this too. So once there's been a motion, they always have to repeat it back just for everyone else to know what motion has been made.
Yeah, you'll hear it's been moved to approve this resolution by this delegate. Parliamentary motions, like I said, it is your responsibility as a voting member to make sure that you are using parliamentary procedure, not just to make your point to represent your students, but to also make sure that the meeting is running efficiently. It's happened in the past where a lot of people have a lot of things to say, and then sometimes debate can turn redundant. Sometimes everyone's saying the same thing. So at any point you feel like maybe the conversation is swaying, you know, swaying to another direction, or you realize that somebody has violated parliamentary procedure, or maybe even the chair skipped a second, or a chair skipped a motion. These are some of the motions that you can make. So we're going to start with point of order. Point of order is to enforce the rules, bylaws, and constitution. A point of order is whenever you see that somebody violated the bylaws, maybe the conventional rules of General Assembly, you can interrupt the conversation and just say point of order, and you will actually be prioritized. And then the chair will ask you to address your point of order, and then it is up to the chair if they're going to receive the point of order. And then point of information, it is to request information. I'm going to say it again. Point of information is to request information, not to add information. I've seen in the past where people say, oh, point of information, you actually forgot this. If you have any questions, you can simply just say point of information instead of saying, I have a question in the chat. That is why you have a motion there. Parliamentary inquiry, you have a question about the parliamentary. What is the call to division? What is the call for the orders of the day? Maybe you realize that somebody made a motion that maybe it's not right, or maybe somebody used a wrong motion, and you want to inquire some parliamentary information, then parliamentary inquiry is your motion. Call for the orders of the day. Remind the group that they need to stay on topic. You realize that you've been debating on the resolution for 3 hours. I doubt that's going to happen, but you realize that conversation is going on, debate is not ending. You notice that the point has been stated, but it's still going on. You can call for the orders of the day, and that will remind the group that, hey, you only have this amount of time for this agenda item. Let's get back to business. Let's stay on topic. And then previous question, that is my favorite motion. I used it a lot last year when I was a delegate, because like I said, sometimes debate could be a little bit redundant. You hear the point, you're like, okay, we get it. Everybody is agreeing to this. Can we move on to voting? Because we have other resolutions to get through. You can make a motion to call to the previous question, and that will close the debate and move to voting. But I will also be careful. Analyze a debate. Just because the debate's taking a long time doesn't mean that it's redundant. Sometimes there is a lot of questions about a resolution. Sometimes people do, want to debate it. Don't just use previous questions just because you want to end the meeting and you want to go on with your day. Keep in mind that General Assembly, this is a very important time to discuss, debate, and vote on resolutions that will determine the future of our advocacy. So if at any point you realize that, hey, the date is going a long time, the point has been stated, let's move on, let's get to the voting, use the previous question.
Yeah, I would just want to also add on to Gerardo's comment and really emphasize, how vital it is to not stifle debate if it's not over yet. Obviously, if people are getting repetitive and, you're hearing the same thing over and over, that's a different kind of story. But, as a delegate of your college, you're representing the whole college. And keep in mind that General Assembly only happens once a year, and it takes 3 days. So I just really want to, caution against that, because you are representing the entire college. And so I just want to, encourage you to take the time to listen to all the perspectives, because your perspective is not the only one, right? There's so many other perspectives that could add to the conversation, and it might even change your vote. And you could be like, oh, maybe this is not the best resolution and path for my college. So I would just encourage everyone to keep that in mind.
Yeah, there are 116 delegates. That means that there are 116 perspectives, 116 opinions, and we want to make sure that at least at any point, everybody has an opportunity to express the concerns of their students. Although you're able to interrupt with these motions, be responsible with motions. Don't use motions to interrupt somebody, or maybe, you want to go home and, you want to move on with your day. Just analyze the debate, analyze it, see where it's going, be an active listener. That's the key. All right, other parliamentary procedure terminology. So what does the phrase "on the floor" mean? This refers to the item of discussion that is currently being discussed or debated by the members of the group. So, for example, at General Assembly, you may be discussing on a resolution, and then out of nowhere, somebody starts talking about another item that's on the agenda. The chair will say, "We're only discussing what is on the floor." So what is currently being discussed. Make sure that if you are discussing whether to uh, approve or reject the resolution, that is what you're talking about, and not anything other than what that is. So that is what "on the floor" mean. What does the phrase "call the question" mean? So what is "call the question"? It's simply the group is going to vote on the pending motion. So what is the motion stating? You're going to vote. You're going to vote on that. What is majority? More than half of the votes casted. So anything more than 50% is majority. What is a parliamentarian? Rules on the proper application of the rules and parliamentary procedure of the meeting. The parliamentary procedure that we're using is Robert Rules of Order. If you have time, get this book. I don't think you can see it. Get this book, Robert Rules of Order. Is the short edition. If not, we have opportunities for you to get trained, and we're going to speak a little bit more about that later on. But parliamentary procedure is going to help you just make sure that the meeting is running smoothly. We don't want to waste your time, and I'm pretty sure you don't want your time wasted. So that is why parliamentary procedure is there, to add structure, to make sure that everybody's being heard, even though there might be a majority. We want to hear from the minority, and that is the point of parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, I would just also like to add, so we do actually have a person called a parliamentarian as well. So the parliamentarian basically just makes sure that we're following all the rules in Robert's rules. So if there's something that we're not following, he actually has the authority to interrupt and say, "Oh, this is not how you should be doing it. Do it this way." So he'll kind of guide us through the whole debate process, and really just throughout GA as well.
All right, some etiquette. Use appropriate and sensitive background. I believe, is this yours, Jen? Is it your? No, that's fine. Okay. So Zoom, we're using Zoom, and hopefully we're all getting used to Zoom by now. We've been using it for almost a year since the pandemic. Everything's been done online. But please make sure that we're using etiquette just as if we were in person. We have to remind ourselves that this is a professional setting. So these are some keys that we need to keep in mind. Use an appropriate and sensitive background. You can use whatever Zoom background that is provided by maybe your student body association, or you can go to Canva. Canva has really great Zoom backgrounds, but make sure that it's being sensitive to those around you, nothing hateful or negative. Yeah, like the Zoom background that I'm using, it's just the symbol of the organization that I'm a part of, and then just a blue background. That is just one of the examples. When not speaking, mute yourself. We all seen it in TikTok. We all seen it in YouTube. What happens when you don't unmute? Maybe you're on the phone call. Maybe you say something embarrassing and everybody hears it. We want to avoid that. So make sure that you're muting yourself. Also, it can be a little bit distracting. Maybe you're at the store. Maybe you're getting food because it is going to be a long meeting. It is just a way for us to not get distracted. Utilize the chat for any discussion. Please make sure that if you have something to say that is regarding what is being talked about, and also make sure that you're not making comments. So sometimes you may feel like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. No, if you have something to say, if you want to participate in the debate, either use what we just talked about, pro or con, and then wait in line, because everybody has their turn to speak. So please make sure that you're using chat responsibly. Also register for poll everywhere before General Assembly begins. We've been emphasizing this a long time now because we've seen it. I was a delegate last year. We took almost an hour, I believe, waiting for people to get registered for roll call vote, for the roll call attendance. We don't want to waste your time. We don't want you to take another hour just waiting for attendance. So that is a way for us to just use our time efficiently. We don't have to wait an hour for that. And also screen name, and then I believe I just got it. Okay, so the screen name that you will actually be using, it is your college, comma, delegate, comma, last name. So if I was a delegate for my college, it will be Riverside City College, comma, delegate, comma, Chavez, since my last name is Chavez. And I will add that in the chat here. Since we don't have it on the PowerPoint. Please make sure that as soon as you log into Zoom, that you're able to change your name. We want to be able to know who you are. If you're a delegate, keep in mind that this is going to be a huge event. We have more than 300 participants joining. And from those 300 participants, we need to know who is a delegate. So changing your screen name will just make the process a little bit easier for us and for yourself, because we don't want to be like, oh, it's a delegate from this college here. It's just easier to just look at your screen and you're like, okay, you're here.
Just also want to add as well, your name comes up whenever you participate in debate and make motions. So we actually check that to make sure it's the right person who's participating. So if you have like an incorrect screen name, you may not get recognized. So that's something to consider as well. It's just make sure you're kind of following that rule. All right, thank you so much, Gerardo. And so we're gonna go ahead and move into our last portion of this webinar and talk about some community agreements and just how they're really used to guide debate and to help everyone be respectful and appropriate. So at this time, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to RAD of Region 2, Jen.
Catherine, right. Before we move on, I'm very sorry. We have 2 hands raised.
I saw 3. I was about to notice that.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and take this first one.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask 2 quick questions, actually a follow-up to the last question I asked with regards to responses and pros and cons. Does it ever create an issue of false dilemmas where we essentially, right, we're giving more leverage to one side when it's that statement might not necessarily be true?
Could you clarify maybe a little bit more what you mean?
Yeah, like the concept, like the false dilemmas are sort of like this idea that, both sides, both arguments are weighted equally when in fact, one is much more true than the other. Like it sometimes happens on, like, in the news where they yeah.
Right. I mean, we go off when we recognize individuals. It does alternate between pro and con. So that's not the impression that we want to give. That the purpose behind that is to make it as neutral as possible, so you get both sides. But just keep in mind, when we recognize individuals, we cannot control what they say. Necessarily, they are still entitled to make whatever argument they want to make, is speaking in favor or either speaking against. So I guess that's the only way I would answer that question. We don't censor anyone who's participating in debate and gets recognized. So hopefully that helps.
So it doesn't quite address like the false dilemma issues that essentially if but I'm just stating that as something that perhaps we can revisit when we plan for future general assemblies. But I also wanted to ask, will pronouns remain neutral? Will we just call each other delegates? Is there space for them to be recognized, or what's the process for that?
Right. So usually we go off of your title. So when we recognize you, we'll say, or the chair will say, delegate from so-and-so college, you're recognized. We are going to talk about addressing pronouns actually in this portion of the webinar for community agreements, just as a sign of respect, if that does come up. But usually, yeah, you will address someone as, just their title. So delegate.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, perfect. So I have one next question here.
Hi, I've rewritten my name apparently, and I just wanted my VP of legislation is not here today, so I'm just in her place. But we've both have been approved to be here, and I'm just making sure if this is how she's supposed to have her name when she comes to the event.
Okay. Yes, that looks correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. And then also just as a note, when we send out the agenda, there's actually a document that has all these convention rules. So that person will receive that, so they'll know how to rename themselves. All right, so I think I have one last question.
Yeah, I know that Gerardo mentioned about registering for the poll. Where exactly would we register for that? Is it an app or like a website we visit?
So the poll everywhere, so I talked about the convention rules. It's a document that's going to go out. On that document, when it goes out with the agenda, which is 3 days in advance, there's a link where we talk about poll everywhere. And so if you click on that link, you should be able to register from that link. Does that help? Okay, I don't hear anything else. Oh, and I just got a message. The instructions for delegates for poll everywhere is actually going out today. So you should be receiving an email shortly. All right, and it seems like we've got one more question.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I just wanted to quickly ask for clarification. So we will hear the pros and cons first, and then someone makes a motion, and then we enter debate, and that's when we cycle through the delegates, and that's essentially our discussion.
So yeah, that's a good question. So just to clarify, before we do any debate on a resolution, there actually first has to be a motion made. And motions aren't necessarily to approve. It's just to like open the floor for debate. So for example, there will be a delegate that, says, I move to approve so-and-so resolution. The chair will say, is there any objections or discussion? At that point, almost all the time, there will be objections or discussion, because then the objection means a con. And so that is what opens the floor. And so that's when we go alternating between pro and con. Debate is either going to end when, we can't alternate anymore. So for example, like say we just heard a last pro and there's no more cons. Even if there are like 25 more pros, you never want to make debate uneven. So we cut debate off at that point. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario where debate ends is if a delegate moves to call the previous question. That's something Gerardo talked about. So if you're calling the previous question, that means you want to vote on the pending motion that has already been made. So since that was the first thing that happened, that's what you would go back to. So those are the two scenarios in which debate would end. Does that help answer your question? Okay, perfect. And I just got a clarification on the way you should do your screen name. So your college should actually go first, and then you're gonna do your college, comma, delegate, and then your name. So for example, for the I think it was the delegate from Santa Rosa. You're actually going to put your college, so Santa Rosa first, comma, and then delegate Benson. So that would be the correct way. I apologize. I just want to make sure we're clarifying that. All right, are there any last questions? Okay, perfect. So I don't see any more. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it back over to Jen.
Thank you for that, VP Squire. And thank you for all your great and amazing questions as we are heading into General Assembly. So with debate, it does tend to get very intense and heated. And with that, we do have a few community agreements before we go into debate and whatnot. With that, here are a few pillars that we have in mind for you upon our community agreements. We have evaluation. When you're evaluating, please be critical of self-reflection, or excuse me, please reflect on yourself critically and of others. In addition to your interactions, don't attack the person, attack the resolution, so per se. The next part of it is empowering it. As members of a organization where it empowers its student leaders, we should empower and motivate each other to also take responsibility for not only yourself and others, but also within your community, as we are representing 116 colleges. Additionally, as I mentioned previously, in the empowerment aspect, you must hold accountability, hold each other accountable, and the community as a whole, as once again, we are student leaders and we must hold each other accountable for our actions. And additionally, the final and most important aspect is collaboration. We're working in a space and an environment together where we need to empower and hold each other accountable, but also collaborate as a team to make sure that as a whole, we are safe, included, and respected in all group dynamics. So let's talk even further about our community agreements. As I stated earlier, the first part of it is argue the idea, not the person. Please don't do that, because again, we are student leaders and we need to respect each other, in addition to opening the doors of potential collaboration in the future. You may not feel it now, but who knows, you could always open the door for whatever collaborations could happen in the future, as there are some resolutions where colleges from different regions have collaborated on a resolution together. So like I said earlier, attack the resolution, not the person or the authors. The second part, take space and make space. So you've seen it amongst our presenters here. When we're done talking, we actually open the floor up to make space for others, so they have their chance to say their 2 pieces of advice into whatever space has been created. The example listed here is if the chair calls on you, but someone has yet to speak, direct the chair to call on the other person. Be mindful and respectful of others around you, as again, there are 116 colleges and we simply don't have the time to get through every single one of you. So if you've already talked, let someone else talk. If you notice that there is a delegate who hasn't had a chance to speak, direct the chair to that delegate instead. Number 3, be respectful of the confidentiality of personal information. Whether you know someone very personally or not, we are in a professional space. In General Assembly, General Assembly, as stated previously, does happen once a year. So you do want to respect the people that are there. There are 116 colleges from each 116 colleges, and there are delegates from each and every one of them. But in addition to those 116 delegates, there are going to be additional members as well, whether that be presenters, other students from other colleges, advisors. Please just be respectful of their personal information as they will be of yours. Additionally, be authentic and honest in a very respectful manner. Here, as I emphasized before, we are student leaders and respect is a 2-way street. So you respect the person as well as the other person respecting you, and be honest with that. If you don't know an answer to something, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. No wrong answer is bad. So please be honest with both yourself and others when in this space. I apologize for that, as we are going to be sharing the space together for 3 days and for several hours in a Zoom room. And if you don't know the answer to something, that's absolutely okay too, because you can always ask for clarification, as Gerardo had mentioned previously when going over points of when going over motions in the parliamentary procedures, in addition to any questions you may have about the resolutions that you can post directly to the authors. Continuing on with our community agreements, listen, respond with empathy, not pity or sympathy. The example listed here is, I understand where you're coming from. That is being empathetic versus that must be so hard. That's pitiful. As you're reading some of these resolutions, you will see that there is a story behind each of these resolutions, hence why they were written and created and presented to you to vote upon today. So going back hand in hand with the idea of the resolutions, again, while going to argue the idea and whatnot, argue with the idea of it, not the person, and also be respectful of their feelings as well, because once again, we are in a professional setting and we'll be sharing this space for 3 days on a Zoom room. Number 7, avoid comments or anything that falls under the category of discriminatory language, that being ableist, sexist, or racist. Don't refer to someone who is a deaf or hard of hearing student as disabled or hearing impaired, as that is considered offensive language or in any other way. So simply to say it, if you don't think it's right, don't say it. It's better left unsaid rather than saying it after all. Additionally, as brought up earlier as a question, gendering folks without their consent. Be inclusive, that not everybody falls under the two she, her, hers, or he, him, his pronouns. There are people that additionally identify themselves outside of the 2 gender norm pronouns. So try to be inclusive of everyone. So we have here using words like everyone, folks, or some of us like to use y'all. That's absolutely okay. But don't use terms such as you guys or, well, anything that may be gendering overall. Again, be inclusive of the people that are in the room, because once again, as I cannot emphasize it enough, we will be sharing this Zoom room for 3 days straight. So be inclusive of all, as we're all going to be working together, and that it will drive the organization into where we'll be going in the next year or so. And our final community agreement, which goes hand in hand with arguing the idea, not the person, as well as sympathy, empathy, and pity. Calling out versus calling in. Calling out is saying in that instance, the example presented here is what you said about the person, not about the idea. Refer back to our community agreements. Please have these in mind when going into the debate, as we do not want anybody to feel unsafe or as if they have been attacked. Hence why we brought up the idea of or I shouldn't be using the word attack, I apologize for that, but arguing the idea versus the person. Calling in is you privately addressing and explaining why and what they did was inappropriate. Do that personally versus publicly, because I do understand that for some people it might be embarrassing. You've heard the experience of Gerardo, who told you about his experience as a delegate. Keep these in mind when talking to other delegates, even your interactions with advisors or other members who you may not work with on an everyday basis. Again, there are going to be 300 plus of you in one Zoom room for 3 days straight. So you want to be respectful of not only their feelings and also of your actions. You also want to be inclusive and understanding of what's going on. Hence why we bring up the calling out and calling in. So in sight, please just refer to these community agreements when going into debate and sharing space with all 300 and plus of you. And aside from that, we're very excited to have General Assembly and hope to see you all there. I'll pass back the floor to VP Squire.
Thank you, and thank you both for co-presenting today. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap up, but then we'll stick around for any last questions. So just want to highlight some upcoming events. As well, always, this was our last resolution webinar, so I'm glad that we had everyone here with us. We really hope to see you at General Assembly, which again will be March 26th through the 28th. The agenda is going to go out soon. I do want to encourage everyone to take advantage of these other events though next week as well, because they will be really helpful in just preparing and being able to participate to the maximum in GA. We do have a technology training that is coming up on March 24th at 4 p.m. So highly encourage anyone who, you know, may not be technology savvy to attend that if you've never used Zoom before, or maybe you're not familiar with it. I mean, I know it's a pandemic, but we all have, you know, technological difficulties sometimes. So that can really help you clear up any issues that you might be having with Zoom. The other resource I really hope everyone takes advantages of is if you're not super familiar with parliamentary procedure training, even if you are, I still encourage you to go because there's always so much more that you can learn. I've learned parliamentary procedure about the first time was about 2 years ago, and I'm still learning things to this day. And I use it pretty much on the daily basis. So I highly encourage you to go and, you know, maybe pick up some new tips that you may be using during GA. So that training is going to be happening March 26th, actually the first day of GA. So before anything happens, that's what we'll be doing March 26th at 8:30 a.m. I know it's kind of early, but it is super important. So please be there. And then one last event that is not completely related to GA in any way, but is still super important that's going to be happening in our regions, is obviously regional elections are coming up. So the positions of RAD, LAD, Vice Chair, Treasurer, and Communications Officer are going to be up for election and for all students who are interested to run for those. So there is going to be a regional elections webinar happening to help provide more information in preparation for that on April 3rd at 2 p.m. So if you get the time in your schedule and you think you might want to run, even if you don't, you never know. So just go ahead and attend that and you'll be able to get the info. Lastly, as always, just some points of contact for if you have additional questions. I'm always available. So my email's up here. It's vp@studentsenateccc.org. If you want to reach out to me with additional questions. If you have questions about resolutions in particular, then you can reach out to our resolutions email. So that email is resolutions@studentsenateccc.org. So just 2 points of contact. So with that, thank you so much for coming to this webinar, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and stick around for any last questions. Feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. But yeah, that pretty much concludes this one.